Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. Today I'm joined by Alfie Joey, who is an entertainer in many forms. Alfie's a real character, known very well across the region, and I'm sure there'll be lots of laughs and a few surprises too. Alfie, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Gill.
I don't know where to start. There's so much that you are doing and that you have done. Most people will associate you with being up on a stage, welcoming people to events, hosting all sorts of different events, doing speaking, being on the TV, all sorts of things. But what some people won't know is that you started life in a very different way.
Yes.
Well, your professional life anyway. So tell us where you started.
Well, I usually tell people now who I haven't met and say, what do you do? And I start to go through some of the things, and I usually say anywhere where there's a microphone. That's usually where you'll find me, whether it's a stage or a radio show or whatever. But I started out wanting to be a priest as a boy. That was all I wanted to be, which was very strange. I wasn't from a religious family. My dad was Catholic but didn't go to church, and my mum wasn't Catholic. And it's very odd. I'm not sure why. I look back on it as like another life lived by someone else, because it's so different from what I do now. So
it was just something that just out of the blue, you just thought, I know what.
Well, I think I was always very boringly nice. and I used to, do the paper round and go and do people shopping and stuff that. And I was always good to grandparents and the golden boy and all that.
Yeah.
But I think there weren't social workers or anything when I was little, but I saw the priest as somebody who was involved in the community. He was always friendly. He was always going around doing nice things for people. Yeah. And so I started going to church with an old auntie, and there is a bit of showbiz involved, isn't there? Because you've got the costume and the lights and a captive audience, and that was it. So whenever that came up in school, which always comes up in school, what do you want to be when you grow up? Yeah. I always said I want to be a priest, and everybody else would be I want to be a cowboy or a nurse or whatever. And I always said a priest. So it was just accepted from a very young age that's
what you were going to do.
And it became normal for me to say that, and normal for people to think, oh, well, that's what he wants to do. And I eventually did, after Peterlee Secondary School, I went away to a Hogwarts for mini priesty wizards and trained to be a priest, and did that for 15 years. So it was all I thought I would ever do. And then I left for show business, I suppose.
Yeah, had a sort of reverse epiphany.
Yes.
Found yourself the other way around. I mean, was being a priest, was it what you thought it would be? Did you get the opportunity to give back to the community?
Yes, I mean, that was the bit of it that I always sought out. That was always the bit of it I enjoyed most. I wasn't the most. I struggled with the spiritual side and some of the rules and all that I found odd. But I always enjoyed working in soup kitchens, hospitals, prisons, the pastoral work where you went out and did like Action Monk, that sort of the real work. I thought it was
getting your hands
just
dirty
really
in the
good
community.
and fascinating, and a privilege as well to be involved in so many different areas that I would never have had the chance to do, other than seeing it out as a career.
And then one morning you just woke up and thought, you know what? I'm going to become a comedy priest.
Well, I'd always done a turn. I'd always been in school talent shows. But as a kid growing up, a coal miner's son in a pit village east of Durham, it was more plausible to train to be a priest than to be in show business. Yeah. Being in show business was for dreamers, As a kid, I would watch. I loved show business as a kid. My dad taught me who was who in which movies, and he would tell me what was good comedy. And so I loved it. But I thought I could never do it. But I always thought, wouldn't it be great to be able to do that? But I can't, obviously. And right through the religious order, I left to join. After I'd trained to be a priest, I joined a religious order. I would always get up and host an event or be funny or sing a song or do impressions. So I was always doing stuff. And then I eventually was, after a stint as a school chaplain, And I did loads of drama with the kids because that was a great way of, again, I never did religion. I just did football or drama. It was just an easier way to connect them to the church or whatever I was doing. So they said, what do you want to do? The order were great. I said, I'd love to do more of this drama. It's great. So I went to Middlesex University, and it was the only university at the time that had a module in stand-up comedy.
Right.
And I went, I absolutely want to do that. So I did it, and it blew me mind. I'd had no feeling like that. It was, it was just a dream come true to do that.
Did you just feel that this is me? This is
well, it was. I'd never felt such a high.
Right.
It was a
euphoric sort of.
Yeah. It was just this is electric. It's dangerous. It might not work. You write a joke, you think it's funny, but you don't know till you've said it, and it was just a brilliant feeling. And that was when I thought I was starting to struggle then, thinking, and I went back and told one of the priests, I said, I really like this comedy. And he said, I think you're making your mind up here. And he was right, and he was very supportive. Maybe they wanted rid of me. But yeah, it led to me sort of discerning, that the time was right to move on.
Yeah.
But it was a hard decision to make.
I was going to say.
That's all I'd ever done.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a change. It's not like you said, I'm a bit tired of this, so I'm going to go and work in a hospital because that's what I'm used to.
Yeah.
And that's a huge change going from the priesthood to comedy.
And it was a shock.
Yes,
it was a shock to my system, and I didn't realise how living in a religious monastic setting, where you get up in the morning very early when no one else is awake, and you do meditation and mass, and everything's very quiet. And you have meal together, and then you go off and do your own jobs, and then come back and you do meal, work, prayer. It's there's a rhythm, and there's this routine. And then suddenly I was in halls of residence at university. It was raucous, and it was loud. And it was the noise I struggled with. And I've interviewed people since who left the army or left prison and said they struggled in the same way, adjusting from that rhythm, and that we do this at that time every day. And it was similar for me. I struggled for the first couple of years.
And when you say you struggled, how did that present itself? Did you retreat inside yourself, or did you go wild?
I went crazy. Well, I'd never been 18 or 21 and gone to nightclubs regularly. So I went crackers for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I was with students. And also, I got about 3 jobs while I was doing my degree. Mm-hmm. I thought I'd never done an outside work job, so I was doing all these jobs. So I was earning money while I was studying. So I was very popular because I'd buy drinks for everyone. And the students were brilliant with me because I never told them what I'd done first. So I was coming to Middlesex University from Battersea every day. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I'm not going to tell them I'm in a religious order because they'll think I'm weird and they won't talk to me. So I was just one of them, they swearing and all that sort of stuff. So that was great, and we go to the pub, but then I'd have to go back to the order. Mm-hmm. And that became, after about 6 months, it became tougher and tougher to keep up the lie. Because we're all going, why aren't you coming out? Because I was great friends with them. Yeah. But I was living a lie.
Double life.
Come back Alfie to yours. I was like, I can't, I've got to. And then there was one of those sessions where the lecturer says, right, we're all going to share something nobody else knows about us. So everybody goes around. It came to me and I went, I'm a monk in a religious order. And they went, whoa. And there were people crying and hugging me, and it was just very moving, Yeah. And they were brilliant. And what was good was they didn't change then.
Yeah, they accepted
they carried on swearing and they carried on being themselves because I was just the same. But now they knew. Mm-hmm. But by this stage, I was then thinking, I'm really enjoying this. This could be the change now, and that's what I struggled with. And then I did leave, and the order were very supportive and came to see me do performances and stuff like that. And
what was your first gig?
So I did Downstairs at the King's Head. It'd be 1998 on the same night as Alan Carr. And I don't know if you've heard of Angelos Epithemou, who he's had his own TV shows and podcasts. Okay. He's hilarious, and he was on Shooting Stars with Vic and Bob. We shared a house for 3 or 4 years. And so all these people who went on to Jem Brister, she's does Edinburgh Festival, Live at the Apollo. She was, I think, the year below. They all did the same comedy course, and we all went and supported each other and stuff. So that was when I did my first.
And did people laugh?
Yeah, it was great. And it went so well. The guy who'd arranged the whole thing said, you compare the next night. So my second gig was as a compare. So I did my set the first night and did a compare gig the next night. And that was it. That was when I had the bug.
But it hasn't sort of stopped there. It wasn't like, right, well, I was a priest and then I'll be a comedian and that's become my life. I mean, you've done so many other things. Was it the comedy that opened the doors to those other things?
Yes, and I found if I just kept working hard, I didn't specifically chase anything. I just found if I just keep working hard and collaborating with people, opportunities just kept presenting themselves. So I used to do a lot of TV warm-up work. Right. So, when they record a show and they go, cut, Alfie, and I'd go and do some jokes or chat to people in the audience until we're ready for another take. So I did lots of that. I did University Challenge.
Did you? Did they have a warm-up for University Challenge?
That was my question. That was my question. My agent phoned me and says, I was doing loads of warm-ups at Granada Studios. And he said, they've had the same guy do warm-up since Bamba Gascoigne. And he's retiring, and they want you. So I went, what do they need a warm-up for? And he said, well, they basically get you to do 5 minutes, because the audience is a bit weird. It's lots of old people who they used to bus in, and students, and nothing in between.
Right.
So you got to go in and make both of groups of people laugh for 5 minutes, introduce the two teams, introduce Jeremy Paxman, and that's it. So I got there, and the floor manager said, easiest job you'll have this. You do 5 or 10 minutes, introduce them both, and that's it. It runs in real time, so you don't have to do anything else. So I do it, first show, and after about 5 minutes, the buzzer broke. And they went, Alfie, and I went, oh, right, I didn't think I'd be going back on. So I've done all my best bits, went back on, and there's a guy with a screwdriver trying to fix his button for about half an hour. And I'm going, so where are you from? And in the end, Jeremy Paxman starts chatting to me to make it easier. And so, yeah, it was just, but you do that and then you meet someone else and then you'd be asked to do, will you audition for our sitcom? I ended up in a sitcom, 2 sitcoms after
you were
that.
In heaven?
Yes, I was in heaven.
You were the doctor in heaven?
As doctor. And I was 7 years, I was in a Johnny Vegas sitcom. And all of those were accidents. All of those were people knew me and said, audition for this. I didn't go around looking for that kind of work. Yeah. Same with the radio. It was just because I was in comedy, just because I was happy to turn up and do stuff. I did the Edinburgh Festival in early 2000s and I did a show in my car, Alfie Joey's Mini Cabaret. And because the average audience figure at the Edinburgh Festival back then was about 7.
Right, okay.
It's demoralising.
Yes.
In a shipping container, in a sweatbox. So I thought, it was another comedian said, you should do a show in your car. You're quite funny in the car when you give us a lift back from gigs. So I mentioned to my agent, he said, let's do that. So we had to register the car as a theatre. and it's a thing, they have to send the fire brigade out. So I was in my car and the fire brigade looked as confused as me. And they went, well, I suppose just don't have too much petrol in it when you do your show. And they couldn't think of anything to say. And then you're registered as a theatre. And then I did that. And because of that, and it was a bit quirky, BBC Scotland came and covered it and interviewed me and then said, will you come on our show every week, the mid-morning show, the Fred Macaulay show, and do a regular spot? So I did that. That led to bits on BBC Sheffield and led to bits on BBC Manchester. So if you just keep up delivering, people will keep offering you stuff.
And so I need to ask you about the car. So
yes.
Did you have an audience in your car with you?
So it was as random. You know, I didn't know who'd bought tickets.
Yeah.
So I'd be sat in the, and then we weren't allowed to drive. It was stationary.
Yeah.
So I was sat in the driver's seat, and then you'd have, at the time the show started, people knock on the door, is this the theatre? There's a big number, all the theatres have a big number at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, so mine was whatever number. And so they go, is this it? I go, yeah, come in. And it was strange, because one day I can remember, right, 3 Swedish sailors and a schoolgirl sat in the front. And you have to, and they're right up close and personal. So you have to put them at ease and do an hour.
An hour?
Yes, it's
Wow.
an hour-long show. And I did back-to-back shows, because the big thing at the Edinburgh Festival is, if you sell out, you can put that on your posters and go, sold out extra shows. Well, I did an extra show every day.
Yeah.
And I'd have pals who were walking back, traipsing back to the digs, demoralised, because they'd only have 7 people in. I go, I've only had 4 in, sold out. And and so I only needed to sell 8 tickets each day, for 2 shows, and sold out the complete run. It looks great if you can put sold out complete run. But it became an adventure within the show, but that led to lots of other opportunities.
Have you ever said no to anything?
I try to now, because it's one of my weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I tell people at the beginning, when you start out, say yes to everything, because you don't know what will come. But then eventually you have to be choosy. That's when it becomes a bit reckless. When things are happening, that's when you've got to be selective and work out what's right and what's wrong. So now I'm having to be more selective now about certain things. So I'll give you an example. My art journey happened by accident. I became an accidental artist, always been a doodler, and then that sort of accidentally sprawled into something, and I suddenly had a wall in a gallery. And recently I've had to decide not to continue that, because the gallery moved, and I loved, John Thompson was the guy who ran the original gallery. He encouraged me, he got me going, and I thought, at this point in time, I'm going to have to say no, because it's a lot of work.
Does it niggle with you though? Do you think?
I wish there was 5 me's. I love doing so many things, and there's loads of things I want to do still, and I'm still running around chasing lots of things.
Well, you're still doing art.
Yes,
but you're an illustrator.
The art job at the minute that takes up all my time, and I'll leave here and go home to do is the art design for the Customs House. I designed their pantomime sets.
Wow.
So there's about 8 cloths, and there's the floor to design and all the proscenium arches, and you've got to draw them all to scale. And I've got a box model of the Customs House in my house. That's not gone down well. It takes up a lot of room, but I need it. And then I design all the costumes as well.
Do you? Right.
So and the dame has a different costume every time she comes on. So that's still a little bit of work still to be done before. I've drawn so many costumes this year. But that's a lot of what people don't see,
Yeah. And children's books as well.
And children's books, so I've just got a new one to come. But that's what I would love to do a lot more of. So I'm hoping when things eventually slow down, people stop booking me to host awards and things, I'll be able to just sit in my art room and draw children's books. That would be a nice thing to do later on. And
you've done theatre as well.
Well, that was my degree, was theatre, but I never really pursued it properly because the comedy took over. But I've written plays, and I've written shows for people, and I've directed other people's Edinburgh shows quite a while ago, and I loved it.
Just popping in to say, if you are enjoying the conversation so far and want to make sure you keep up to date with other episodes, then please hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Let's jump back into the conversation now.
This podcast is about being fearless and taking big steps, and clearly you've done that time and time again. I mean, one of the things you did was you went on Britain's Got Talent.
Yeah.
When you'd already established that you had talent.
Yeah.
Why would you choose to put yourself through that?
Well, I didn't want to. The thing that I was scared of was being buzzed off and that being on YouTube. And my kids seeing that, and other people in the class going, look, your dad's rubbish. So I was worried, not for me, but for my kids.
Yeah.
Because they asked me and my double act partner to go on it. They'd seen some of our YouTube videos.
Right.
So I got the text through and they want us to go on Britain's Got Talent, but it was next on Sunday.
Ooh.
And it'll be live, no auditions, straight in front of the judges, live at the Dominion Theatre. But could you write us an act? And I said to my wife, I'm not doing this. And she went, you are. She said, you spent all that time doing these YouTube. You're out the house rehearsing and putting shows on. Why wouldn't you do it? And my boss at the BBC then said, I think you should do it. He said, you know, they're not going to stitch you up because they know you've got a right to reply. They know you'll have a radio show. So I then thought, all right, so what could we do that would work? So I wrote an A to Z of impressions, thinking, because we did a good Ant and Dec, both of us. So I thought that would look good. They've never had a double act doing the double act. They were stood there as the first impression. So if we did an A to Z, A stands for Ant and Dec. We start with the A.
Right.
We'll be all right. So we rehearsed it, sent it to them, and then they got back. And this on the Wednesday we'd committed. Then they went, "Oh, we'd rather you did something else." So
helpful.
We've committed. So I wrote another sketch, which wasn't as good. So then we're on the way down there, and they got back to us and said, "Could you go back and do the A to Z, but not do Ant and Dec?" And I went, that was the banker, you know. That was. So I rewrote it where my mate does a good Alan Carr, so A stands for Alan Carr, but that wasn't the killer start. So that scared me. And then you get there, and it's like a circus. You know you're arriving at Britain's Got Talent because there'll be 20 acrobats walking down the street. I'm not exaggerating now, people with dancing dogs. You get there, it's like a carnival of what it looks like on the telly. Yeah. And there's queues for this and a queue, you've got a queue over there. There's carousels for everything. And it's such a well-oiled machine. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. But behind the scenes, it's just, you don't have a minute to think. You are nervous, but it's your adrenaline that is flying all over the place rather than fear. It's sort of, you keep thinking, are we on now? When are we on? We've got to be on soon. So then they take you behind the stage while someone's on, and you can hear that buzzer going right through the building. It's like a drill. It's like everybody jumps. And they were interviewing us while other acts are being buzzed off, and they were interviewing us with, I think it was a Romanian guy dressed as Superman with an accordion. And
how can he compete with that?
He could hardly speak English, and we're trying to do this interview. And then somebody tapped me shoulder and went, "You're on now, guys." And we went, "Oh!" And we got ready, and then we got there, and they went, "We just want a reaction shot." And it's like that all day. You keep thinking, so your adrenaline's up, and by the time you're on, you're quite relaxed because it's like, I can't wait to get on now. And I don't know whether that's part of the thinking, but it's.
You didn't get buzzed off.
We didn't. We got couldn't have gone better. So all I wanted was a good YouTube clip.
Yeah.
And
not to embarrass your kids.
But bizarrely, my son, who's very shy, he'd never seen it. We never watched it. So he got a bit upset because everyone who'd seen it was, "Your dad's been on telly," and he couldn't understand it, and he got very confused. So he didn't like it. But yeah, it worked brilliantly. But going back to what you said initially, it really, I went on at the wrong time in my career because it was, you do that show in the hope of getting a job on local radio or something. And I had that. So it was, I almost felt sorry for me partner, my double act partner, because we couldn't take advantage of it in the way lots of people do. So lots of people take that clip and go on a cruise ship or go around a circuit with that validation as a springboard. But we couldn't. I was stuck in the Northeast, you know.
We were on the radio at that
point. I was working, doing all sorts of stuff, and I had a family and everything. So I wasn't in it. We did one, again, this is fear. We did one gig for Ant and Dec. Shortly after it, they did a big charity gig at the Hilton in the Northeast, and they said, would you do your set? I thought, well, we won't do the set that we've done on there, we'll do a song. So I wrote a song that we could do in impressions. And there was celebrities everywhere, every table had Ronan Keating, Alan Shearer, Jeremy Kyle, etc. All of their mates from ITV had turned up.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a flipping heck. And we were meant to be on at 10 o'clock, and then it got to 11 o'clock. And that's when it's messy. Carnage and it's messy. And my mate was white. And when I saw how scared he looked, it made me laugh. I just went, we're going to be fine. I said, they're so drunk, they won't even remember if we've died. So don't worry. And it worked. But it worked because we did the song. If we'd done a set, nobody, they'd have been talking and everything.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
We started the song, people were talking, and then they stopped and they listened, and we had a good time. So.
And I was so. You obviously have an ability to ad-lib in all sorts of different circumstances. And I always think radio is probably one of the most, tell me whether this is right or wrong, one of the most challenging things, because you've got to show up every day or every week or however often your show is, and you've got to say interesting stuff every time without putting your foot in it, treading that careful line. You don't want to be victim of cancel culture and all of that sort of stuff. You've got to be entertaining, you've got to be funny. And it's got to be different every time. Where do you find all the material from? How do you do it?
First of all, you've got a great team. You've got an army of producers and people who produce lots of content, because it's, you can't do 4 hours on your own every day. I mean, 1 hour at the Edinburgh Festival, and it's the same hour for a month, compared to a brand new 4-hour show every day.
Yeah.
So there's loads of work goes into it. There's loads of preparation goes into it. But I think if I was to give you an answer as to how I did it, I was obsessed by it. I loved it. So, and I didn't know this or realize this till I left.
Yeah, which is often the case, isn't it?
I was just stupidly, obsessed and concerned about the show. And we'd have a meeting afterwards to plan the next day's show. Yeah. So you would know the nuts and bolts that were going to be in it. And I would go home and listen to podcasts and listen to, you've got Keir Starmer on tomorrow, you'll be doing breastfeeding in public, and you'll be doing so you'd have to know, you get briefings and you get people preparing stuff, but you have to prepare stuff yourself. And I would do all that, and I would write fun quiz questions, and I would then post a tweet at 8 o'clock at night. That would be the fun bit throughout the show that people join in with, and then I would get people tweeting, and then I would tweet them all back. It was crazy. I was just...
It's more than a full-time job, that,
isn't
it?
If
you're doing it daily.
Yeah.
And it's not, it has to be, really. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do it, because I think people think that TV, radio is very glamorous, and they think, well, that's an easy job, isn't it? You rock up and you talk for 4 hours and play a bit of music you like, and then you go home. But that,
I know.
In order to keep it interesting, you need to put that level of
you do,
dedication
and that's all them things you've just mentioned. Spot on. I did a tiny bit in Coronation Street 2 days, and I told someone about it who's a comedian, and she said, "Oh, I'd love to do that." The glamour. I said, "Oh, honest, it's there's nothing glamorous about." I think it was probably glamorous back when Corrie was on one night a week in the 80s, but I think it's on every night of the week now. So they've got an indoor shoot and an outdoor shoot, and you go on set and everyone's friendly, but you just look around, it's just famous people learning lines. It's just work. It's just work. And it's the same with radio. I think the better the show, the one thing that knocks me now is listening to radio shows where it's lazy, or it's just people reading lists, and it's just people not putting any thought or care or just doing absolute basic stuff.
So why did you leave radio? Were you just exhausted, basically?
Well, I didn't realise I was shut until I left. I left because they'd changed the model during COVID, which I fully agreed with. So we went from a 3-hour show to a 4-hour show. I had a co-presenter, and they took the co-presenter off me, and I was on my own. And there used to be a travel person and a sports person, all these people in the studio, so you'd have lots to play off. And then we had to reinvent the model during COVID because they were scared we'd get COVID. So it was just me in the studio on my own. And then Vintage BBC about halfway through, and we're going to keep this model because it works. And I thought, well, I can't sustain this level of work
Yeah.
and go back out when the doors open and do me nighttime stuff for me awards. And I love that world. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that world really helped the show as well. So I thought, I really need another plan here. And as if by magic, Ray Spencer, who then ran the Customs House Theatre, the theatre we take our kids to, the Panto, he asked me to design the sets and changed my life again. You know, it's just, again, I didn't think that was that opportunity would ever be there. And I initially went, Ray, I can't do that. That's way too big for me. And he talked me into it. And so then I told the BBC, and they were a bit shocked, because usually you get sacked. You sack them. They don't usually, but they were great, you know, and they were brilliant. I loved it. I loved the job. But I did think, if I just rely on the BBC, and I built the show into a thing where I couldn't do anything else as well as that. And when we came out of COVID, I thought, I've got to look elsewhere. And then I got the theatre job, and then I set myself up as a communication coach and public speaking coach.
And that's, you do a lot of that now.
Yes. So that's become a big thing. I want to do more keynote speaking in that area. That's another bit of the jigsaw I'd love to grow, but I'm loving coaching people, because I'm convinced it's a skill and not something you're born with. And all of the jobs that I've done in public speaking, I was dreadful at the beginning. And when I started on the radio, I was so bad. I can remember the first week, I got a text from a guy saying, "Mate, you're terrible. I'll give you 6 weeks." And
helpful.
But I got a text again when I left from the same person 15 years later. And you always remember the bad texts. You get tons of nice ones, but you never remember them. You remember the bad ones. And as I was leaving, this guy said, "I sent you a horrible text on your first week. You won't remember that." Of course I did. And I just want to say sorry, but I'm a big fan, and I should never have said that. I love what you do. I'm going to really miss you. But that person was right. I was terrible. I was so bad. And I was the same with comedy. I was, starting out, you have some shocking deaths, and so the point is, I think anyone can improve. Anyone with the right work, right kind of coaching can get better. It's a skill. And with this being the age of the podcast, the age of the YouTube channel, the age of the panel, and the public speaking is just boomed for people who wouldn't have normally saw themselves in that position. We're all communicators now. It's a different world in the last couple of years. So.
Yeah. And there's a big focus on communication, isn't it? Especially if you look at younger generations that live their lives on their phones, just absorbing content all
these
the time.
Influencers.
Yeah. So out of all of the things that you do and that you're doing, if you could pick one that has been your career highlight, what would you say so far?
That's a good question.
It has been?
I think it would definitely be doing the radio during COVID, because all my comedian pals were out of work.
Yeah.
So I was really aware of that. It was horrible for lots of people, and it was where I felt I was giving back most, because I was inundated with people saying, "Can you help our business?" And my LinkedIn was full. So we'd stay at 10 o'clock, we'd come off air, and my producer Misha and me would write, "Can you get this person on? Can you get that person on? There's a wedding photographer, doesn't know what to do." And I think local radio at its best is usually when things are at the worst. So whether it's storms, or whether it's school closures, or COVID, you can give people help in a way that national radio can't. So people don't go to 5 Live to find out what local government are telling them to do, or what they can do locally. They come to you. So you can feel people listening, people needing local advice. So that was probably when I felt I was most useful, but I was trying to entertain people as well and lift people. And so we were on the floor every day, because it was just 4 hours just on our own. It's like we're in this bunker. Me, the producer, Anthony Day, and Beth, and just this little team provided, the producer were providing us with lots of content as well, but we had to produce an extra hour of content, and it was It was exciting but sad at the same time.
It's interesting that though, that you for your career highlight, you've picked something out there which actually is about what goes back to your priesthood. It's about that need to give back, to support people, to do things for the community. A lot of people in your position would have gone, when I met such and such, like a famous person, or when I had the biggest audience, or that sort of thing. So I think it's really interesting. It's really it's a nice thing to hear that actually the most satisfaction you've got in this amazing career, meeting all of these incredible people, doing all sorts of incredible things. The one thing that's really stuck with you is when the community that you're part of was at crisis point, and you were able to do something to make it a little bit less rubbish.
Yes, I never thought about that. But maybe there is some kind of link back there. Yeah,
I think that's lovely, Gav. That's really touched me that was your key point. So what's next then?
Well, I think the keynote speaking, I would love to, because I've hosted so much, and I still love doing that. I love facilitating. I love listening to people, interviewing people. But it's a lot of work. And sometimes at certain events, I will draw everyone as well as a little added extra. I just like doing, challenging myself. And then I thought, do you know what? I really could make it a little bit easier for myself if I was the person in the other chair and come in and do my 45 minutes powerhouse keynote speech, which is always adaptable, but pretty much the same. Whereas when you prepare to interview someone, or you're facilitating a conference and you're looking at the panel and you're going through everyone, I do a lot of research. All that goes in the bin pretty much at the end, because you've got to start fresh for the next conference. Whereas if you're the keynote speaker, you come and do your act, and then you move on to the next one. You can freshen it up, but really it would just make things a bit easier, but it would be exciting to do as well.
I mean, you in this region and further afield as well, you're very well known on as the host, and clearly the host with the most if you're drawing and doing all of that as well. But you do awards dinners, and you do conference hosting, and you always seem really engaged with whatever the subject matter is. Sometimes you must have to host things that are pretty boring. How do you make it sound exciting?
Well, I host the Northern Law Awards.
Well, there you go. Sorry, no offence to the Northern Law Awards, but as a lawyer.
the Northern Accountancy. But I know nothing about those subjects. But I am a bit weird in that I love the atmosphere. It's my job. If you're getting paid to host stuff like that, I think it's your job to make it great. And this is a massive night for people. I was telling you outside, I host the National Back Awards. You wouldn't think there was an industry to support people's backs, but there is, and it's massive.
It makes me sit up every time you say it.
I know, the Alexander technique. So I watched people when I was comparing those awards, and just to see the involuntary people standing up to clap for people who it meant so much to them. Yeah. I think it's your duty and it's your job to be interested and be invested. And sometimes the subject matter might be a bit heavy or a bit beyond me, but I try and find something that I like or something of interest, or I think I hate it when people phone it in and are not passionate and are not. I mean, I do think I must be a nightmare to be with, because I am very positive and it's my natural default setting. But I think it's important when you're hired to host to be invested and interested.
What's the weirdest thing you've been asked to do? Not necessarily to host, but what?
Well, I'm always amusing my family with, you'll never guess what I've been asked to do now. I think someone's asked me to be a judge in some kind of escape room situation where it's a charity event. Right. And I think all these business people are going to be in a room, and a charity have asked me to play a judge and pretend in character. Well, I love all that.
That sounds really good. Yeah, that sounds great.
But it's weird. You just the variety's great. And I think that's what I love, more than anything. And where again I think I'm very lucky is no 2 weeks are the same. I've always got different things on, and
Yeah.
Panto's coming up soon, and I'll be in that, and that's 3 shows a day some days.
Back to your routine that you had when you were a
I
priest,
suppose
sort
so.
of
You're great
taking
at
that.
bringing it back to spotting patterns.
I mean, Alfie, I could talk to you all day. You've had a brilliant career so far, and having seen you in action, I know that your public speaking, your keynote speaking, and your hosting will go from strength to strength. And I'm sure there will be some more pivots and some more unexpected things that come up along the way that we go, oh, look what he's doing now.
Thank you very much. It's a great show.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, and you've been a brilliant guest.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. If you did, then please follow or subscribe. If you enjoyed what we talked about in this episode, then you might enjoy this one here, which is also linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening.